Jim, everyone. This is Naruto here, and in host for the podcast Hot Takes Live. Today we have multiple people. Again, we have Dino from Fluent, we have Prashant from Spheron, we have Jobin and Anthony from 10, and then we have Cryptom Cryptonomicon, if that's how I pronounce it, from Versatus. I'm so sorry. Feel free to correct me. I have tongue twisters all around me today. But yes, let's start with the basic introductions of everyone here today. And today we will be talking about the Ethereum ecosystem and how we all are enhancing with modularity with different things. For example, Fluent, what Avail is doing, what 10 is doing, and all those. So over to you, Dino. You want to take it first, and then we move to 10, and then we move to Spheron, and then we move to Versatus.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Excited for this chat. I'm Dino, one of the co-founders of Fluent and CEO of Fluent Labs. And at Fluent, we're building the first blended execution network. So it's more concretely an Ethereum L2 that supports apps from wasm, SVM, and EVM. So for EVM and SVM, just copy paste, and then wasm, you can dip into any of the millions of Web2 libraries for any of the WASM supported languages. And the idea behind blended is being able to have this one state machine where all these apps, all these programs are atomically and in real time composable.
Jobin, you want to go next?
Yeah. So hey folks, my name is Jobin and I'm a developer relations engineer at 10. And what we basically do is we are a encrypted layer 2 on Ethereum that offers encryption and private shared states, secure on-chain random number generation, and all these things, which developers can use to build confidential dApps or dApps with confidential features where their data, transactions, and on-chain activity could be kept private, and it's completely programmable.
Sweet.
Anthony, go for it. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm Anthony, Alchemist X on Twitter. I'm also from 10. I'm a blockchain engineer, joined in February, but before that worked with the team, which was originally from R3, so was part of Enterprise DLT before moving to Web3. Did some of that, payments, DeFi spaces, and RWA, and then did some tokenized deposits with a US firm actually called Fluent. So I used to work for Fluent. It's a different one, but now I'm with 10, and yeah, so I just work on that stuff and also do a lot of R&D and innovation type research as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me here, Naruto, and thank you so much, everyone. Like, we're looking forward to the entire session. I loved what 10 and Fluent, you guys are, even Versatus, you guys are doing at this space. So on this Spheron side, what we are trying to build is a distributed cloud framework. So what basically it allows you to go and connect those fragmented GPU ecosystem to a single one. So that is what we do at a very high level. Now, what basically it brings on the table, it brings a whole new economy for the providers who are looking forward to kind of lease out their compute to the network with an open marketplace and fair marketplace, which combines with a lot of new innovation, which we have already published on our white paper, which includes matchmakers and tons of other things, which makes the entire marketplace more fairer. And on the other side, which is the user side, user gets a lot of abstracted use cases, or you can say UIs, to kind of access this compute power, which is coming from the community and the data centers and all people are across the globe. So yeah, that is what we are trying to kind of do and work around Spheron and enabling GPU for everyone so that innovation should not stop.
And I'm Andrew, founder of Versatus, and what we're building is effectively very similar to Spheron, but a little bit more focused on the CPU side of things. So we're building a verifiable elastic cloud compute network on top of EigenLayer. So I think of it like a DigitalOcean or EC2 on top of EigenLayer. So enabling verifiable decentralized compute, which will allow developers to decentralize their entire stack. Right now, as many of us are acutely aware the only piece of the stack that's really truly decentralized is the smart contract, and that leaves a lot of choke points for regulators, for governments, for attackers. So I'm a decentralization maxi. I think that effectively the entire web should be decentralized, and what we're building helps get us a step closer to that.
I like the whole idea of decentralized maxi. Not a lot of people like it's you can say it's a spicy or hot takes already, but I've seen a lot of people deviating from the idea of decentralization recently. But yeah, for everyone, most of the people already know me. I'm Naruto, senior DevRel at Avail, and I basically host all these podcasts and work with Avail on unification layer, what we're building. Which is part of Avail DA, Nexus, and then Fusion, multiple things, but we are shipping constantly. Let's get into most of the important things here, most important questions, and we already have 700 viewers. That's pretty good. My major question, and this is for everyone, feel free to chime in. I would take it to Andrew first. The question here is, what do you think? What do you think? How everyone here is improving the Ethereum with modularity? The whole idea of I've seen people putting in the ideas, oh, modular is not the best thing there is. It's a scam or whatever. I do not agree. But what are your thoughts here? What is your vision to scale Ethereum?
I mean, modularity is very clearly not a scam. Everything on the web today is modular. I mean, most modern scalable applications are built as a series of what we refer to as microservices. They're really small components of an application that do one thing really, really well. They communicate over the wire somehow. Maybe they use a Kafka queue, or maybe they use pub sub model or some other mechanism for the application to communicate, API gateway. But basically, you can't scale anything if it's not modular. The only way that you can scale if you don't have a modular ecosystem is by dramatically increasing the compute resources that are allocated to that application. You see this sort of with what Mega ETH is doing, where they're saying the validators are going to require 100 cores. Which is fine if you want it to be super centralized and very easy for it to be, kind of shut down and controlled and censored. But if you want something that sticks to the crypto ethos, which is why I'm here, then you really do need, you need to be able to scale horizontally. You need to be able to scale by adding more and more components to your ecosystem, adding more and more operators in your ecosystem. And so modular is the only way to do that. I think the way that we're adding to Ethereum is that we're bringing general purpose compute to Ethereum. That's something that doesn't exist currently. You have networks like Akash that are built on Cosmos. You have Render and some other deep applications which are more sort of GPU focused on Solana. But you don't really have general purpose CPU compute on Ethereum, and so that's something that we're bringing. I think the reason that you don't have that is that prior to really prior to EigenLayer, it would have been very, very expensive to do that. It would have been really expensive to bootstrap the network of operators. It would have cost you a lot of inflation in your token to actually do that. And then obviously Ethereum as a base layer or as a settlement layer is relatively expensive. So EigenLayer kind of allows us to borrow that economic security from Ethereum to drive value back to Ethereum stakers, but without having the massive expense of bootstrapping the network on our own.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I was down with that whole thing. I'm also a modularity kind of advocate here, because just like you just said, it does have that scalability, but also I bring in another aspect to it. It's the scalability, contextual scalability, the ability that what makes the ethos and crypto so compelling is just this rapid innovation, the ability to kind of iterate beyond the means of traditional systems. And when you need modularity for that, because people are going to be working on sort of different problem sets, different contexts, and they have to be able to let those reins go and just blast off with that, and then be able to plug it back into a system that's kind of going to unify all of these different domains. And I think that's the most bullish thing that I find with modularity, is this ability that we're all going to do what we got to do, and then we're going to come and find that middle ground and a way to interoperate and to bring that value to the masses. Like, and that's kind of like with, you know, I mentioned to a coworker, I was watching a Steve Jobs clip this morning, and it was the one where like he got challenged about dumping a project that was technically superior at the time, and his response was kind of like that it's about starting with the user, right? Like starting with the user interaction and what people are actually intending to do, what they're trying to do, and then working, you know, solutions towards that end. And I think that's what modularity provides. Like, it allows you to have these patterns that are going to be solved in these really like niche spaces, and then everybody's going to derive value from that. So that's kind of my opinion on it.
Yeah, so would love to kind of add on top of that. So there are a few things which I think you guys have covered most of it, but there are a few things which I wanted to kind of touch base upon, which Andrew, like you basically picked it up. If you look at the entire whole concept of, because I come from Web 2 background, like my background has been like working with enterprises and solving their problem statements, and I've seen the journey when in 2013 and 14. Angular and all of these things came into the picture, and then we started a journey of PWAs, and then you have a singular web application which has been like getting carved out from ASPX pages. If everyone here who are coders, they will remember that. And I've been the part of that. And since then, there was one thing which I understood as a solution side is if anything which you want to scale, you need to bring a modularity into it. If you don't, then again, it's going to fail at certain given point of time. That's one thing. Second thing, in terms of the Web3, initially when I kind of got into the space, first my thought was like, why even modularity is not even there from the first point of time? Because the day I entered into the space, because every state is getting on one and no customizability is there, right? So literally you cannot customize that, right? What modularity basically brings you is, first, it brings you independent nature of its own, which basically allows you to go back and customize it as per your requirements. So for example, at Spheron, when we were kind of struggling to kind of find out, I know Eigen was also there, but we also have matchmaker on Eigen for off-chain computation. But when we were looking at the entire space, specifically talking about Ethereum now, we first thought like we go and launch our own layer one. Now the problem with that approach is like you get stuck. You can't do a lot of things. You have to invite tons of folks, validators, and tons of other folks to kind of it's quite expensive, right? And if you're building which is already expensive in nature, let's say GPU market or CPU market or anything like that, which is by default expensive because you need to procure hardware. People are putting millions and millions of dollars into hardware and bringing that in your network. You cannot expect them to kind of like controlled by some 100 folks, the entire things. So you need that modularity to kind of kick in so that you have customizability on the chain. That is what we kind of achieved with Spheron, is like we have an open ledger where we record everything and it is fully customized as per our need. And the other major thing which people don't really understand, modularity also brings the UX on the top layer, which is an application layer. Now, if you let's say in our case, we wanted to make more gas layers or all of those things which you wanted to kind of bring into the picture. Imagine if I had to do that on some L1, right? It has been nightmare, like 3 years, 2 years. And then the name which you have taken and as of, so the reason they have not been able to scale is because the UX shit, like it's all their UX are shit. Like I should not say all of these things, but in reality, the UX basically is a bubble of what is foundation in there, right? So if you don't fix the foundation, your UX is going to be shit. And basically, and modularity allows that shit to get fixed. And that is what that is the reason, like I've been I say, like I always, the decentralized maxi is one thing, the other maxi is the modularity one, and I've been the core believer of it. And when Avail was there and when all of these guys were like launching all of these smaller components, I was quite excited and being the part of this entire ecosystem from the day one.
Yeah, and I would add to that. Sorry, Dino, to cut you off, but I'm actually going to give Fluent a shout out. You wouldn't be able to do what Fluent's doing, right, without modularity. You'd be stuck with the EVM. And so if you want the liquidity of Ethereum, right, but you want a developer experience that's closer to something like Web 2 that allows you to onboard more developers, and you're seeing more and more of this. We also were originally planning to launch as an L1. And we went through that same exact journey that you went through, Prashant, and it's really eye-opening. But yeah, modularity opens up this entire world of possibilities that just literally is not possible without it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to add one thing to this from a point of a developer relations guy. Like basically, developer relations guys are ones who evangelize about a certain topic. So the way I consider how modularity is, I take an analogy into perspective, like my example, because I come from a biology background. I did study biology. So I take Web3 as a similar thing like a human body. So it's not one single organ in the body that does the entire job. Like processing, memorizing, purifying your blood, storing your insulin and all that stuff. It's different organs and different components. And that is called as autonomy. Each and every organ has its own ability to independently, adapt, evolve, and thrive. That lets your body grow in a human lifespan. But if one single organ does the entire thing, then it basically gets bottlenecked. And that's where this modularity in Web3 helps, because each and everybody would be specializing and taking care of like data availability. Somebody would be taking care of interoperability or data storage layer, whatever it is. So everybody has their own part. They do it really well. And thus, when you combine all of that, you are able to, like the keyword like that I said, adapt, evolve, and thrive. Because Web3 is a complex ecosystem. And everybody's fighting, everybody's trying to improve. Example, like Prashant said, UX. But if one guy's or one foundation or one entity is trying to do all of these things, then you can't focus on UX. So you need that modularity to focus on these three key elements: adapt, evolve, and thrive. And this is only possible because of one term, that is decentralized autonomy. That is what I will term this as. So unless we do this, we'll be rigid and we'll be stuck. There will be no innovation. We'll be, bottlenecking it, or basically screwing the entire innovation pipeline.
Yeah, totally. Just to you guys, I think you guys covered most of it, but just to kind of sprinkle a little bit more on through, and a few of you touched on this, but through the lens of like an end user and a developer, like just broadly the user experience, right? Because we're like, we can kind of like reason through the ways that modularity makes sense from like an efficiency and scalability and like all the standpoint, and even like iteration speed. All that stuff is absolutely true, but it's sometimes we're in the thick of it, right? Like we're in the trenches, so sometimes it's hard to like kind of see what that and remember what that end state like could look like, the vision for it, and like why we're doing this. And so sometimes it's helpful to like look at where we got with the cloud. And a few of you again touched on this, but if you think of it from like a developer experience, like the fact that we've created this world where in the cloud where a developer can just really focus on like the logic of their business logic and deploy that. Maybe it is in like almost like a serverless like experience. They throw it over the wall to AWS Lambda and then just like seamlessly plug into all the other components that power their app that they don't want to socialize. It allows them to move so fast. And that's an absolutely amazing developer experience that we've built. And then even from the user standpoint, all that stuff is taking place behind the scenes as well, and the user is none the wiser, but they get all of the benefits of modularity. And so it's like really easy for people to like look at the kind of like messier iteration phase that we're in right now and poke holes in it, because okay, fine, like we're still iterating on like the core like designs, but it's happening. And like I just like to kind of zoom out and remind myself that hey, this isn't some like academic theoretical like exercise. Like we did this, like this is a design that's like proven to work amazingly well for devs and for users. So that's definitely what keeps me excited every day.
So here's my hot take here. First of all, I'll tell you this. I agree with everyone's idea here. Whatever you guys are putting in. But the biggest thing, and this is what I've been feeling ever since, like, I started Web3 2020, end of 2020, close to 2021. You had smart contracts, you're building something with Solidity, NFTs, ERC20, all those. I think there's a lot of DevX fragmentation. If I have to go on OP stack, then I have to learn all about OP stack, do something. Then I have to go on, let's say, Spheron. If I have to do with them, I have to learn their documentation. So I feel like it's a little bit harder for the end dev users to build something, or it is different from 2021 bull run. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I would agree to a certain. It's somewhat true. I think the bigger problem is not about I've got to learn. You have to do that in Web 2 as well, right? And there's 27 million developers building in Web 2. If I want to build a machine learning application, I got to go learn PySpark or TensorFlow or SciPy's documentation, right? I need to learn Python. So I don't know that is where the developer fragmentation comes in. I do think that there's something to what you're saying. I do think that there's developer fragmentation from the perspective of languages. I think there's developer fragmentation from the perspective of tooling. So if you want to build on Ethereum or an Ethereum compatible platform or EVM compatible platform, you need to learn Solidity. And then you're probably going to use something like Foundry. If you want to build on Solana, then you need to learn Anchor, you need to learn Rust, you need to learn Anchor, you need to learn their frameworks, you need to understand what an SPL is and all that. So if you want to build across different ecosystems and across different chains, that fragmentation becomes very real, very fast. But just learning the documentation for a given platform, if it's within the same ecosystem, I don't think it's as big of a deal.
And I think just to add on top of that, after AI, this is also not an issue anymore, because
it becomes a lot easier.
If it is 5 years back, then the scenario might have been different. But again, I think you have clearly mentioned is I learned Angular, ASPX, and then C#, C++, C, embedded C, and then tons of different languages in my time frame. And programmers are meant to kind of do it. But the thing which they don't like is you make their life hell. Example is hey, you know what? I want to deploy a smart contract. Now, to do that, I have to run an entire EVM machine to do it. Imagine in just a case. So that's a nightmare for them. But let's say if you ask them, it's hey, you know what? Spinning EVM machine is quite easier. Just click one button, it's live. That's easier. That is how you basically get more closer to solving the dev adoption issue. Because we all have to understand, devs are not the one who is going to pay you for all of those things. They are here to build an application on top of you. So you have to make their life as easy as possible so that they can go and evangelize yourself evangelize your product into their company so that they can adopt it. And that is how this entire world. If you look at the companies, I know the founders from Postman. If you guys ever have used Postman, and one of their investors are investor as well. Just for disclaimer. So when we were reading about their story, imagine for 5 years they only did one thing, is develop adoption and helping developers to query those APIs as seamless as possible, which nobody was doing, right? And now see where exactly Postman kind of exists. It's one of the beauty of this entire solving the problem of dev. So imagine earlier, I still imagine that because I started coding in my early life. So I used to write a script in command line and all of those things, SSH script and tons of other things to kind of test my APIs, right? But the moment they came in, download the small tool they had, and then just keep on pinging your API and you are getting the response back. So that is what I think that is what we all have to focus on if you want to kind of bring more developers into the ecosystem. Learning the languages and learning the tools is the part of their daily routine, and they will do that. But don't make their life hell when it comes to spinning up the server. You should not ask them to kind of go and spin up and spend hundreds and thousands of dollars to kind of do it. This is not going to happen. So that is where we have to all move towards.
I'm really glad that Prashant brought up that take on there, because I thought I might bring up the same thing and it might become like a mini hot take or controversial. But no, 100% on board. In terms of the overall sentiment is languages, tooling, I'm just gonna say fuck it, it doesn't matter right now. When you launch, when you go at 10, the thing is, as an L2 or as any protocol or solution, you look for like the most frictionless lift that developers can get on like right now. How can you build today, right? So that's why we just went one-to-one with EVM APIs, and everybody's, you know, building, like they're already going. But in terms of like the midterm, like the immediate, like, you know, 2-year, 5-year time stream, we're talking like, you know, these kind of gaps. The most important thing that the developer is going to be is really the knowledge of the solution and what they're trying to accomplish. Like, what is the goal of this application? Like, what are sort of like the sequential steps or the algorithms that I need to make this happen? And then AI and generative AI is going to kind of like pick up those bridging pieces, and sort of like bring everything together very quickly. Like even at 10, like we kind of have sessions where we use AI tools in practice and like, you know, learn how we can integrate into novel solutions and get people going, because this is going to get real fast, real quick, real heavy. And I think that's where swinging it back, like the most important thing after you get that initial lift to say, like, we're making it as easy as possible. In the long term, it's about that. It's about the availability of the data. It's about like the understanding of the solution and the user experience. Because once you have that infrastructure in play, and once you have that modularity we talked about before, that's where, you know, AI, private agents, and you know, developer tooling can leverage that, and they'll have the resources needed to bridge and to be accessible. So I think that's kind of like, you know, just piggybacking on what Prashant said.
Yeah, and
just one.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No, just one phrase to back what Anthony said that we follow in 10 also. That is, better the UX, DX, better the UX, because you'll have less depressed, less anxious, and developers scratching their head less, and they can focus on building good products. So let's not give them bad night pace.
Yeah, and one more thing, just wanted to kind of just wrap it up with, because this basically resonates with my story. When I came into Web3, I started my journey with the Gitcoin, if you guys know. And then became the part of kernel, and that is how my journey has started. And the beautiful part about the Gitcoin that time, I don't know like what is happening there now, because not been active a lot, but the beautiful part was like every dev was endorsed, and they all helped each other in all the ways. And that is where I think if we really want to drive more dev adoption or bring more devs into the ecosystem, we need to understand their thought process very different. They are introverts, they are not extroverts. I have been the introverts. I became extrovert because of doing all of these things again and again for the past 5 years, but they are not. And my co-founder, he's a CTO. You won't find him anywhere. Like he doesn't like all of these things, right? But what he likes is testing out testing out new products which are coming live, right? So we need to endorse them. We need to help them out. We need to figure them what exactly they need, versus like doing a marketing gimmick just to kind of push some tool which doesn't even work. So that is where I'll close my statement, but you guys can take it on.
Okay.
If you have any
yeah, I'll take one final note from Dino, and then we'll move to the next question, because we're, you know, still a little bit low on the time. Dino, please go for it.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to be quick. Yeah, I guess because it's the hot take series, let me push back on a little bit. One thing that is hard for me to reconcile is like, you know, if the mentality is, all right, everything we can do to decrease like developer friction and learning curve is good, that seems contradictory to like the whole like, oh, it doesn't matter, anybody can learn any language. Like that just seems like a weird thing to me. And I'm not saying that's not true, right? But like I can also kind of apply that to like other levels of the stack. Like, you know, if I'm a hardware engineer, I could say, oh, it's not that hard to spin up a server. If I'm a DevOps engineer, I can say, oh, it's not that hard to spin up an EC2 instance. Yet every layer that you make, every layer that gets laid on, right? Like a server, EC2, Kubernetes clusters, Docker, serverless compute, whatever. You're like making it collapsing the friction more and more and more. And it just seems like a weird argument to make that like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Of course it matters. Like you're making it easier for people who know, you're enabling people who don't. And at the end of the day, to me, that's kind of fundamentally not much different than the language story. And by the way, like I'm not trying to say that like people can't learn. So like our thing is actually both, like for Fluent. So like I'm not trying to make the case that like, you know, any particular language. It's more of, I just feel like, you know, somebody who doesn't know like C or something like that obviously gets value out of being able to bring a language they do know, and then being able to like the languages as like a mechanism for bringing in other libraries that they don't have to build is just like all compounds to decrease developer friction and better the experience. So that's just my quick take. I sorry if this sends us down a tangent, Naruto, but I wanted to like clarify.
I just away. I 100% agree. That's one of the reasons first thing I mentioned was languages. And just this is anecdotal, but I think it paints the story. And by the way, we also commissioned a survey about this at Versatus, which if you guys want to DM me, and language barrier is one of the top reasons why developers are not building in Web3 today. And I know it sounds counterintuitive because like a lot of us have gone and learned those languages because we care about it a lot, but a lot of developers just don't want to. And so my anecdotal story is a friend of the company is the former CTO of Home Depot's business-to-business marketplace, which is massive. They spend $750 million a year on cloud compute. Their entire stack is built in .NET. They wanted to switch from .NET to Java. They told all their developers, hey, you're going to have to learn Java because we're going to switch our stack to Java. 80% of the developers said they'd rather quit. They'd rather quit than learn Java. And there's plenty of resources for Java out there. AI is much better at writing Java code today than it is at writing Solidity code. It's much easier to debug Java today than it is to debug Solidity code. So I fundamentally disagree that reducing the barrier to entry from a language perspective would not have an effect. It absolutely would have an effect. And I think it's basic economics. Anytime you reduce the opportunity cost, you're going to get more people that interact with your system. So 100% agree with Dino here that the language barrier is a serious barrier.
I 100% agree. Also, just to get like a word in really quick, I think that to some degree, like we were kind of all sort of in line with Dino from my perspective. I think the difference where it subtly kind of seems contradictory is that we didn't explicitly say that there's like a time dimension there, right? Like it's sort of in the immediate short term, like when you get up, like anything we can do to eliminate friction, like right now, is beneficial and is worth doing. But at the same time, we're at a point in history where like things are accelerating beyond what we know, and it's kind of like we look in and hone on what we're doing, how fast we're going. That's like kind of like, okay, we're jumping by this, but we got to know that at the same time, all the other vectors, all the other experts are working simultaneously on sort of like synchronous products, synchronous technology. So, and in that sense, is kind of the leap that we're sort of banking on or guesstimating that, you know, at some point in the near future, like as we go forward, it's going to be less and less about that, and it's going to kind of transition from, yeah, you know, that kind of thing.
Yep. I definitely agree with most points here. This is something like, you know, new devs or devs who came in like, you know, end of last cycle, they come in every once a week or every once or 2 weeks, and they're like, hey, Naruto, how do I like, you know, cope up with all these things? Very confused. Should I learn Rust? Should I learn Solidity? Should I run Circom? And I'm like, you know, just learn one thing, get better, and then move on from there. These things always come up, and you just do what you're asked to do on your job. So you just learn what you need to be learning on your job. But anyway, moving forward, you know, like just keeping everyone's time, respecting everyone's time. I have a good question for Dino. And this is because, you know, Fluent is doing something called blended work. And I want to understand, like, what does it mean when you look at the docs, something like, you know, using wasm, EVM. Dino, can you like tell us how this approach is helpful for the ETH ecosystem? What is the exact plan? Whatever you can share, and if there's some help over there.
Some help, yeah, okay. Sounds good. So what we're working on is this idea of blended execution, and so let me just kind of set the stage for it. Right now, there, you know, historically, most of the chains that have popped up, most of the L2s that have popped up, certainly have been EVM chains, right? And like those have gotten popular. Obviously, like the EVM is kind of the most popular execution environment, but over the past year, we've definitely seen a lot more, whether you want to call them alt VMs or next gen VMs, whatever it may be, and that can, you know, pop up and people get attracted to them, whether that's a move VM, a wasm VM, an SVM. And the reason, but right now you kind of have this weird fork in the road where you're like, all right, well, I could either build on the EVM, which has, I'm not even going to shit on the EVM, by the way, maybe that's another hot take, but like, it has ecosystem benefits or go-to-market benefits, and then or a next-gen VM that has, I'll just say, like technical benefits. But right now you kind of have to like pick one or the other, like pick your, and sacrifice the other side. And what we're trying to do with blended execution is to say, hey, you can actually create an environment that pretty seamlessly blends these different things together. So what does that actually mean? It means you have kind of like one state machine, like literally like picture the Fluent L2, and you're able to put your EVM apps there, your SVM apps there, and wasm apps there. And you can, not only can these things actually live together in harmony and kind of compose atomically and in real time, but you can also do some pretty fancy things by building your app across these different environments. So for example, maybe it's some like Dext in Rust that actually makes use of ERC20 tokens, and or other types of languages can compose together very elegantly. And I think that this isn't something that we, this idea has been around for a little bit, right? And I think there's been a lot of other attempts at merging different environments together. And I think our innovation is actually in the design itself. Like you'll see some of the other multi-VM implementations where maybe it's a third party that's coming and saying, hey, how do we put EVM on Solana or something? And it ends up being, from our experience, a little bit clunky, kind of feels more like two networks than one. And then even with some of like the better, but in our opinion, not great implementations where you are running multiple different VMs in the same environment, it might be a little bit smoother, but it's definitely like very inefficient. And like the way we've designed the system with kind of using, we're only running one VM, right? And we have kind of precompiles that like facilitate all the interactions between these otherwise different like VM targets and make sure the apps can all kind of map together and all the standards are handled. And it's just like so we look at this like blended VM as kind of a new type of VM that is more efficient to handle these apps from different ecosystems and also trivially extensible. So you can add kind of like more of these over time. We could add Move, we could add Cairo, we're going to add Fuel. Fuel will probably be like our first our integration. And that doesn't mean we're actually going to, just a quick like disclaimer, like that doesn't mean we're going to try to put all of these onto our L2. We have like this VM and framework that we would love to see other people spin up different combinations. But the point is like the design itself is very, very extensible and efficient. So that's what we mean when we say blended execution.
So so just a very quick follow-up on this, right? How does from a perspective of a developer, how does it look like? Do they just code in one single language? I think currently you're choosing Rust, if I'm not wrong. And then how does it move if they're looking to do something on SVM or something else?
Yeah, so we just came out with our updated docs around this blended execution notion in our public DevNet, and it also comes with an example that actually shows. It's like a chess game, but it shows some of the logic being in Solidity and yet making use of some Rust libraries. And so from a developer perspective, it feels a little bit more like programming in Web 2, where you're able to just kind of like mix and match these different languages. And technically that like Solidity's home, I'll say, is like EVM, and the Rust home in this case is kind of wasm, but it really feels seamless. And that's, I think, the main innovation, and that can be applied towards SVM and other environments too.
I think that's pretty cool. I do not think I've seen too many implementation like that. I think I've also signed up for there was a private DevNet that I had access for, but that's a different thing for Fluent. Moving forward, so like now I have to shift some gears on. We want to talk about rollups, and this is one of the most important questions, or like my understanding on like what do you think about based rollups? Tycho is one of the first ones, which is a based rollup, and I think they're also having base sequencing. So what do you think overall? Can they beat the market? How does everything look like? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, I would say that there's a couple of issues with base rollups. Number one is block time on the L1. So you have 12-second block times on Ethereum. That's just not going to cut it for an L2 user experience.
For sure.
The other problem is cost on the L1. So if you want to, like we at Versatus, we have a rollup called Laser, which is also a language agnostic rollup. It's Laser's language agnostic stateless rollup, where we don't use any VM. We actually use like containerized, or what are called unikernels or app kernels runtimes in order for developers to be able to build smart contracts in whatever language they want to bring. We looked into building that as a base rollup. And what we found was just that the user experience is going to be garbage. It's going to cost so much money for them to actually execute a transaction that you lose all the benefits of being an L2. So I'm not. I think as Ethereum moves along its roadmap and continues to bring costs down, and you end up with fully sharded chain that can maybe change from a cost perspective. But if you don't reduce the block time, I don't know that base rollups really have a future. That's my opinion on it.
And one thing that I would like to add to this is there are a lot of upsides, like when you think about redirecting or shifting all that load into L1. But there is one downside which I think will piss a lot of people. That is the redirection of the MEV income, because you'll be able to still do MEV, but the income goes to L1. It doesn't stay in the L2. So you're losing a major income stream as a chain. And that is things that you're still able to do MEV, but not able to gain, the benefit as a L2. It's very sad, because I do some sort of research. Study more about MEV, because we are a chain that doesn't support MEV. It's 100% MEV free. But I'm open to exploring possibilities where negative MEV might be eradicated and positive MEV opportunities where transparency is needed should be there. But this situation is very bad, where MEV is still possible, negative MEV is still possible, but there is no income. Income completely goes to L1. That is a very sad reality when it comes to base rollups. I think that will take away a lot of people who want to be on your L2.
Yeah, I think there's something definitely to be said about the, the conceptual trust model of the L1. It's something that is well known and comfortable, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of people, and there is sort of like a space to research that, but I just kind of question the immediate value proposition of whether it's needed in a real sense, because there is a lot of sort of more understanding and transparency and I guess standardization between different forms of validation and between L2s and how L2s work and operate. And I think that in terms of our perspective, and I won't speak from an official products perspective or anything, but sure, because we're an encrypted layer 2, there's unique use cases that allow an understanding that maybe MEV or some characteristics can be bad in a sense of a fully independently trustless, a competition based on individual entities, but those entities aggregate to something greater. And if you can get at a protocol level some sort of value, whether that's a dark pool or a netting mechanism, to find further revenue streams for participants, then that's also an added benefit that you wouldn't be able to really derive from a based sequencing. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay, definitely loved all the takes here. I'm one of those guys who is always questioning how the base rollups work. I know how it works, but what the longer solution is, and if they're actually going to be viable or not, viable solution for scaling Ethereum or not. Moving forward, so I wanna this is a question for Jobin and Mike. And I know you guys are working at 10. Encrypting Ethereum. So I want to understand what does it actually mean, especially when you have something called an open ledger, or if you have already a lot of your data is on the blockchain. So what is encrypting of Ethereum would mean here? Plus, do you know what other projects are doing, and why do you think 10 is doing things differently?
I'll say a very simple example first. That is, we had HTTP and we had HTTPS. And that transition brought in a lot of new products lot of new possibilities. Like you couldn't see Amazon working on HTTP, and it's because it's a type of encryption. Like I'll try to make it simple. That's why I'm saying it as type of encryption, which makes sure that your communication or whatever your data that you are doing in the web, the activity stays private. Nobody else is able to peek into your activity, and that was missing in Web3. You could not build an Amazon, or you could not build an e-commerce solution or a health solution or even institutional level trading, because institutions have huge amount of money and we are missing out on such a huge amount of liquidity because they don't want to see their movements being public. And such a lot of use cases like this were not possible. And for this, solution was a private chain. But any other solutions which are 100% private goes against the ethos of Ethereum, where decentralization is there. So what we thought was we needed a flexibility. It should not be us who decide what should be private or public. It should be the developers who choose what you build and what should, when you build something, a feature in your dApp. So we brought in encryption, and that allows you to add features where you can keep something public or private, and it's 100% programmable. And that is what we need. We need a balanced approach. We don't want 100% private chains, or we don't want 100% public chains. I mean, we do want 100% public chains, but wherever there is a necessity for confidentiality, we need a balanced approach where you can program something based on certain criteria rather than being rigid. I'm repeating the same thing when I said modularity. Rigidity kills innovation. Shouldn't be rigid on being a public maxi or private maxi. There is no point in that. You'll be starving the the growth of the chain or the entire ecosystem. So better is a balanced approach. So we thought of bringing that in, and that means you could have private shared states. We already have shared states, and shared states is a beautiful concept, and that's what powers decentralization. But we want private shared states where things still stay private and is shared. The state is shared, and that makes things like I said, institutional trading possible. Very, very classic example, because Web3 is the entire space is very close to speculating things or speculation, gambling, and all that stuff. You can't build a poker. Recently, I saw a Twitter discussion, very big discussion, a lot of controversy happening around why poker is not possible in Web3, because there is a huge income possibility there, a lot of activity you can bring. You can bring a lot of masses into Web3, but you can't build that in Web3. The problem is there is lack of programmable encryption, where you cannot keep your cards that you hold in your hand private. It'll be public. Anybody can go to Etherscan and see the events and log and figure out what cards you're holding. So we need to keep the cards in my hand private, but on the table or somewhere else public. So that programmable element is needed, and that is what encryption is. That encryption is what I'll say is proper encryption that we need in Web3, and that is what we are building, which unlocks a lot of use cases, even for masses, like building decentralized social media where your messages and group chats would still stay private and the public posts would stay public, or institutional use cases where you could have private liquidity pools or dark pools, or very simple example, you could have your private stop loss or limit orders. All this use cases get unlocked because of encryption. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I jump in here really quick?
Go ahead.
I could not agree more with Jobin. I think that it's such an important component. Like when you brought up, I saw the discussion on poker, and I was like, why is anybody even asking this? Of course, the answer is that everything is public. I know exactly what my opponents are holding, and so encryption is really important, but also that flexibility where you can have encryption if you want it. You don't necessarily need it if you don't need it. Another use case that I think is like so obvious for public ledgers that hasn't been explored because of this particular issue is enterprise accounting software. The amount of money spent on enterprise auditing every year to Deloitte and the other big four, which are horrible organizations. I've worked client of Deloitte, so I shouldn't say that, but they're horrible organizations. They waste so much money just basically going through financial statements. These are things that could very easily be put on chain if they're encrypted, but enterprises aren't going to put their financial data on chain where everybody can see every single transaction that they're doing all the time. I think something like 80% of all money transfers occur intra-organization. It's a crazy. Like the vast majority of money transfers are going from accounts payable to accounts receivable, like back and forth within the same organization. And you're never going to get those on chain if you don't have encryption, because enterprises do not want their financial transactions to be public. But if you had it on chain, you could dramatically reduce the cost of their audits, like something like 90% reduction in cost. And all of a sudden you open up this use case that is massive, that literally every single company would use, because it would just reduce their cost by 90% for a very important component of their business. So I 100% agree with you. Like encryption is such an important component of
for real. I did. Somebody interviewed me like 3.5 years ago or something, and it was on. It was an accountant, and he was building a community of Web3 accountants, and it was about double entry accounting, and it's just staggering. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, the co-founders of 10, like Gavin, Case, and Tudor, like that's the background. Like that's all like you know, accountancy, CBDCs, syndicated insurance, you know, risk, supply chain. So like the enterprise use cases are there for the picking, and it's really surprising that we haven't really as a community jumped as far onto it to adopt that. And now is really a bullish time, like with ETFs and all of the adoption. And I'll tell you like this, like in London, our like inboxes were blowing the heck up, like years, like a couple years before the public starts jumping on board and like realizing that institutions are all, you know, picking up like longs and like sort of getting in on the train. Like they were already prepping, they were bullshitting like on the public that they weren't interested or it was flaky, but on the inside they were like hiring teams. So it's like ridiculous. And just the last word on that kind of thing about encryption. Like just what is interesting from my perspective and what got me so bullish on 10 was that these things that seem simple, if you're talking about, you know, on-chain gaming or whatnot, or poker, well, like a newsflash, right? Like what do they call like human interaction? It's actually like a real subset called like game theory, right? And it's the idea that a lot of our intense motivations and counterparty interactions have this sort of like gamified mechanism. So if you build on top of that, that kind of just shows how broad the solution space is. So we're doing a lot of AI agents, you know, PII protection, industry and enterprise use cases. So like this is what makes encryption powerful.
Yeah, I think there have been multiple projects coming up with encryption, and I think it's pretty good. We just need to see how we do in mainnet and how like we bring all these enterprises. You know, I really want to see big corporations, big Web2 companies coming in asking about us, like, hey, how do we integrate with your tech? That's the basic idea, and I think that's a win for us, because one of my friends and he works in Google, and he's like, I understand like, you know, what blockchain is, what are you guys doing? But I don't see Google or like bigger companies integrating with you guys, no? Anytime soon. So I think like that's the win for Web3 as a whole, where we do not pay them to come to us. They just find it interesting, find a use case, and come to us.
I'll tell you how you get those enterprises: faster, cheaper, more secure. That's it.
For sure.
These are soulless entities that have zero ideology. All they care about is bottom line. In fact, by law, at least in America, they have to care only about bottom line. It's a fiduciary responsibility of theirs. They can go to jail if they don't execute on that fiduciary responsibility. So as long as it's more expensive, as long as it's more public, as long as it's not provably more secure, as long as it's slower, you're not going to get them. But once you accomplish those three, you know, sort of that triple threat of faster, cheaper, more secure, they'll come, because they don't care what they're using. It's not about like what the back end technology is. For them, it's just about how does this integrate into my business.
Yep.
And when they go ahead, Jobin.
Yeah. Naruto asked one question which I missed. That is, what more projects are working on encryption? I'll not name them, but a bunch of them are working. But all of them are working on privacy, confidentiality, or encryption. It's not flexible or programmable, and that is what they are missing on. So I'll say that is what everybody should focus on: being flexible, being programmable. Like the whole today's space, I see the flexibility a discussion around modularity, you choosing as a developer or a user what you want to choose. So that flexibility is something we need to speed up our innovation. And being compliant also. When you are flexible, you can make certain elements public, which is very important for being a compliant chain. So we are the only chain out there. 10 is only, I'm not shilling, just saying so that people can take this into take this in a serious note and start working towards that. We are the only chain out there in the market that is offering programmable encryption and confidentiality at the same time being compliant, legally compliant, because there is something called as data revelation, where you have a timer for your private data, and the community or the DAO can vote to make a private data public. So that instead of jeopardizing the entire DApp or the project, you catch that malfactor or the malicious actor and penalize them rather than penalizing the entire project. So that flexibility to make certain things public and private, and when and what conditions, with what criteria or time period, is super important to take us forward.
Yep, exactly. I'm so sorry to cut you off, Jobin. I think the only thing is like I want to move a little bit more forward for the questions, because we are running out of time, and I want to respect if someone has like calls and everything. It's a weekday. So my final question, second question, last question for Andrew and Prashant. Like, you guys are working on decentralized compute. Can you give me a very, very basic idea on what exactly decentralized compute would mean? I know in terms of Web 2, but what it means in Web 3. What are the incentives of like deepen things or anything that you're building, and why should people care about it?
I'll quickly pick on that, and then Andrew can follow it on. I'll go with example, okay, instead of because I love seeing the world with examples. And the example for me is like when I was a Web 2 developer, I always wanted a way using which I can capitalize on my laptop, which was just sitting idle and doing nothing at my house. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing, I always wanted to intrigued about servers and wanted to always kind of find some interesting use case. I also did it in my early days, but somehow I was not able to capitalize on those servers which I bought. I basically thrown them out. It was worth $2,000, and I just thrown them out. And there are tons of other things which it's me. Why I'm taking my example, because like me, we live in a world where we have billions of people. Like me, the possibility of people like me are going to be, let's say, 10,000 or 100,000. Let's say I'm just taking a very bearish number here, not a bullish number, but this is what bearish number is going to look like. But even if those people who are very interested in putting and bringing those imagination forward and utilizing their tech efforts to kind of procure some hardwares and put it somewhere to kind of use it, there was no way to kind of do it in the Web 2 world. Amazon came in, they started like wrapping up the data centers. I think the closest thing which people can imagine what Web3 brings on the table is the distillation, but imagine distillation in a decentralized way. That is what I think, and through another team, we all are basically trying to achieve the same thing. But on the very user level, if you look at now what Web3 does, it allows me, basically it's an open source tech, and when you build an open source tech, and when you build an incentive-based systems, you need to allow community to participate, or else you are going to fail, right? So that forces any protocol, any projects to involve the community, and that community member can be me. So people who are 10,000 people who wanted with having the same interest now can use their interest to capitalize it by putting or buying the servers, which is sitting idly somewhere or anywhere in the world, right? That's one part. The second part, which is more economical as well as more business oriented, this is more about the passion driven. Now the business side. On the business side, if you look at the entire data center data, which you will find across the globe, and a lot of people basically publish it, you will find data center only get used 25%, 30% max if they are very good data centers with a high, with tier 3, and I'm talking about tier 3 and above, right? Tier 3 and tier 4. Below that, tier 1, tier 2, just forget, right? So they are still struggling to kind of capitalize on the investment which they have made. Now, the problem with them is they don't have any other option to go and sell their existing computing power, which can be used by some research guy who's sitting in India. I'll tell you one classic example of economical barrier as well, right? I come from India because we are the folks like who are very thoughtful about the when we spend money. Okay, I'm very proud in saying that because that is one of the reasons like we have been saved from recession and other things. But we are also very proud of saving the money, and we are very cautious when we spend even a single dollar. Okay, so imagine in India where a developer who wants to innovate, now he cannot innovate because the GPU he's wanted to acquire is like quite expensive, which he cannot afford. That is one thing. Second thing, Google and all of these AWS guys, they will give you $1,000 worth of GPUs. You know, like how GPUs drain the money out. It's quite easy to kind of do it. So in that, to get into 350K raise, you have to literally go and create a company to kind of do that. Now that's another problem. Because as a developer, you're not going to do all of those things. So what you do is like you say, like, let's drop it off. Like, I'm not going to do all of those things. Let's go and work in some company and try to utilize the resource to fulfill my dream, which I wanted to kind of achieve, right? So if you look at that perspective, it suppresses one of the major economy of the world, which is India again, now, which is kind of coming forward. Developers who are sitting there to innovate. It is restricting them to innovate, right? So that's the other problem statement. Now, how Web3 basically solves it on the bottom line, it basically opens up the entire marketplace. Now, the data centers which has the idle capacity sitting somewhere, basically, if we give them 10% additional yield on top of their existing capacity, right? We are still giving them money. And as Andrew also mentioned, is like all of these bigger companies, bigger firms, they'll just look for cash, nothing else. So their job is to print the cash, right? So we are giving them additional cash. For developers, since these guys are adding these extra capacity, which was not even used and idle, for them, it's ultimately free. So they can add in whatever cost they wish to. Now, on the other side, the developer who's sitting across the world, it doesn't matter like India, I'm just taking as an example, it can be in US. There's also a lot of people like who don't want to kind of invest like that much money. So they can basically go and pay lesser cost to kind of lease that compute. And this creates a very amazing economical structure where what we believe in Web3 to bring and distribute the economy equally, that basically brings on the table for all of us to kind of thought through. So that is something which basically it solves at the very high level. And I'm not talking about decentralization or anything. It's a very peer-to-peer system. Now, in the decentralization world, you control everything by bringing smart contract layer and all of those layers to ensure is like the marketplace and all of these things works fairly, so that things just happens in the marketplace. And that is where decentralization and other things come into the picture. But that is what always motivates me. And this is my motivation, in that somebody else's motivation can be a very different thing. But my motivation at Spheron has always been is to solve this pain issue, because I face that, and because I face that, I just want to solve it. I don't know like how true it's gonna be down the line, but I'm very bullish after seeing a lot of investment which is happening into this space. Now I'm very bullish in terms of is like this is gonna blow out. Like people are really gonna shift their workloads to decentralized P2P computers. But the only thing which we need to solve again is there are a lot of things to solve, because again it's a very early days of deep in compute. But at least we are there. We are there when we see applications getting built and computes are getting shared in the network.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with almost everything that you just said. I think the economics of it is a big component of it. The way that we're building our system is slightly different. It's like our big emphasis is on availability and having optimal redundancy. So I'll give an example as well. You go to AWS or DigitalOcean, you spin up an instance. That instance is in a region. It's sitting in a data center somewhere on a server. They may have like snapshots and backups, but effectively it's sitting on one server in one region. If you want redundancy across multiple regions, across multiple servers, you have to actually manually manage that. Now with EC2, it's elastic, and what it means by elastic, it scales up, scales out, and so you can add additional instances as demand for it is there, and you're only paying for what you use at the time. But when you scale it out like that, it's all in the same data center, it's all in the same region. If you look at, people like to think of the world, I've realized this, but people like to think of the world through the lens of the ideal. And so they look at AWS, they're like, oh, AWS works great. And it's true, it works great until it doesn't, right? And so back in June last year, there was like a 9-hour outage in a major region. DYDX went down. Something like 40% of Ethereum nodes went down. Like Ethereum almost didn't survive this AWS outage. And so when we talk about decentralization, I think that there's multiple different levels of decentralization. There's geographical decentralization, having lots of nodes running in lots of different places, which also gives you geopolitical decentralization. There's operator decentralization. There's also resource decentralization. If all of your nodes are running in the exact same on the exact same resources, i.e. a data center run by AWS, are you really decentralized? Do you really have fault tolerance? Do you have high availability? So we want to build a system very much like what Prashant was talking about, where individuals can contribute their latent compute resources to the network, where developers can access those latent compute resources, where you have wide decentralization across all of those categories, operators, resources, and geography. And as a result of that, you can get closer and closer to what we call the edge, right? Where you're serving users that are interacting with the applications on your network from a geographic proximity that's very close to them. And as a result, you can actually scale. You can scale out horizontally, get closer and closer to the edge, and deliver a uniform user experience no matter where the user is in the world. So I think all of those components are really, really important. At the end of the day, I think the economics of it are what makes the most sense. From an operator's perspective, I get to clip a little bit extra yield, whether I'm a data center, mom and pop, individual contributing, laptop resources or whatever it may be. I get to clip a few extra bucks. And then from a developer's perspective, because this is not the key driver of a bottom line for some major corporation, you're paying a lot less for those resources than you otherwise would. So just on an economic standpoint, decentralization makes a lot of sense. This has been tried over and over again for years. And without crypto, without blockchains, it didn't work. You had federated networks, mesh networks. You had all these sort of like, out of the kindness of my heart, I'm going to contribute some resources to this network. And it just never worked because you didn't have the economic incentive. The other thing you didn't have was any security mechanism. You didn't have slashing. You didn't have proof of stake. You didn't have slashing mechanisms. So you could get malicious actors. You go back to the days of like Napster, LimeWire, and some of these other peer-to-peer like data sharing and file sharing networks. And you would end up, you think you're downloading something, you end up downloading a virus. So there's no verifiability of what you're actually accessing it. So crypto solves both of those problems. It solves the economic incentives to contribute to the network. It solves the malicious node or adversarial node of Byzantine generals problems, where you may have adversarial or malicious nodes that are attempting to serve malicious content to end users, and it solves those problems as well. Sort of kind of final hot take, and I know we're bumping up against time and we're actually over time, but final hot take, I don't actually think blockchains are the right mechanism for consumer applications. I think the stuff that Prashant is building, I think what we're building, I think what Tin is building, those will be really, really good solutions for consumer applications or B2B applications. What blockchains actually are, in my opinion, are their infrastructure for infrastructure. They're great for payments infrastructure. They're great for DePIN. But I don't think that they're the right tool for consumer applications. I think consumer applications need to be built on layers that have been that abstract the global state layer away from it. Having this global state layer is really, really valuable to a project like ours because we can map out all of our resources. We can make sure that all of those operators are registered, that they get paid properly, that we distribute the income streams to them, and that we can slash them if they behave maliciously or if they're too faulty. All those things are really, really, really important, and you need a blockchain for those. But I think we need to kind of give up on trying to build all of these direct to consumer use cases. I know that it's like, all the VCs in the crypto space want to ask, where are the apps, where are the apps, where are the apps? The apps are going to be built on top of layers that are built for apps. They're not going to be built on top of layers that are really designed for core infrastructure, which is what, in my opinion, layer ones are.
So who was going to say? Go for it, Anthony.
I wanted to get one sentence in just to shill Andrew and Prashant, just in case anybody's watching and they misvaluate it. The economics of that is huge, of the DePIN and decentralized compute. We've been talking about dApp builders and general use cases, but just from an enterprise perspective, like what I'm saying, what I think Andrew was saying about regions, and one of the things is like service availability and SLA on centralized infrastructure is not what you want it to be. From an encrypted protocol standpoint, when you're doing a regulated market or a solution in the that bridges TradFi and DeFi, where's the data being computed? Where is it stored? And the other thing is, I would like to see DePIN we dealt with a lot of regulatory templates in enterprise DLT with R3. And this is something like if you have this decentralized compute that is highly efficient and optimized, this will lend into like carbon credits or incentives on a regulated regional basis where enterprises and companies are going to get kickbacks and the money's just going to flush. Just takes one domino. So that wasn't mentioned, but I just thought I would throw it out there.
And I'll go back to Andrew's comment. I really like the whole idea, like you cannot build the consumer apps, or even if you can build some of them, you cannot build all of them. A lot of people come in and they're like, oh, we are trying to decentralize education system, or oh, we're trying to decentralize anything, probably like forms or to-do lists. And I'm like, that's very weird. I've seen examples where you take some Web 2, put it on Web 3, and I'm like, that's not how it works, So that's definitely like one of my hottest take ever, and I always keep on saying it, like, don't try to decentralize or try to use blockchain on every small thing. But again, like, I think it was
decentralize. Try to decentralize everything. Try to make everything verifiable if it needs to be verifiable. But you don't need blockchains for everything. Blockchains are a specific solution for a specific problem set. Yeah.
For sure, like the differentiation, the difference between the blockchain and the decentralization, that's a very different that's a very different thing, and people don't understand that. So definitely agreed there. Okay, so the final thing, if anyone has any final remarks on like anything about the modularity or anything like scaling Ethereum, please go for it. I'm so sorry for like keeping you guys for another 15 minutes. But yeah, like final remarks and how people can reach out to you if they want to build on Fluent, Spheron, Versatus, and 10. So Dino, you want to go first?
Yeah, totally. Sorry, I was muted. No problem. Thanks for the time. This has been fun. If people, I guess give me a quick Fluent chill. I guess our public devnet's out now. First thing supported is our first kind of like 2 environments supported are wasm and EVM. If you're somebody who wants to jam on some blended apps using Solidity and Rust, come reach out. Accessible. You could jump in our Discord. You could DM me. It's Fluent XYZ on Twitter. And yeah, would love to chat.
For sure, go for it.
Sorry.
I'm just going through the circle. Go for it, Prashant. Next.
Yeah, awesome. So on the Spheron side, we are launching our light client. We have something called Fizz Node challenge in few days down the line, where you can. I'm just going to publish the video. We recorded the video today, where 3 systems which I just talked about connect together your friends and family system, and start using their system to run some multiple LLM models and all of those things. So that is going to go live in a couple of days down the line. So if you want to kind of be the part of that, and if you have all of those systems, smaller systems and everything, do join our Discord. All the links, you will find it on spheron.network. So you don't have to like go anywhere else, or you can just type Spheron on the Google. We have done a good job in doing publishing a lot of blogs to put our SEO good on the Google side. So please go ahead and do that. And then we have providers onboarding. If you are someone who is data center, who owns a lot of servers around GPUs again, you can always reach out to on Discord. We have a partnership form there. Go and fill it in, and we'll be more than happy to kind of take it forward. And yeah, so the final take on the modularity, let's be modular and let's fix everything on the UX side.
For sure. Jobin and Anthony, go next.
My remark would be flexible. Whatever, as a user or as a developer or whatever you're building, infra, layer 1, layer 2, or even consumer-friendly apps, be flexible. Don't be rigid. Rigidity, the whole discussion, I've been repeating this, be flexible in terms of centralization, decentralization, decentralizing sequencers, or maybe choosing your hardwares or languages, VMs, always be flexible. Because flexibility always invites more innovation. It's like opening the floodgate. More people would come, more people would experiment. And down the lane, maybe along this way, you can do A/B testing and figure out what works best. And down the lane, maybe you can pick those best ones and make that your core product or your core offering. But initially, because we are in the initial phase of Web3, it's like MVP stage for us. So whenever you build a MVP in your startup to go and pitch to a VC, you don't say, I'll only build on AWS stack. It's absolute foolishness. You have to be flexible. So let's all of us be flexible in terms of whatever we are building, and try to understand that we have to innovate so that we can get in more masses and offer them wonderful things, because it's economies of scale at play. So we aren't doing much if we have less number of people. So we need to let in more people. For that, we need flexibility. That's my remark. And at 10, you can reach out to us at 10 Protocol. That's our handle. You can reach out to me or Anthony. And our testnet is live right now. And whatever we have discussed, whatever Anthony and you has shared about programmable encryption, if you want to build any of that or anything else, feel free to reach out to us. We have incentivized testnet and programs running. We'll be happy to help you build something new in this space that is more flexible.
Yeah. And follow everybody here on X if you're not already. I'm at alchemist_X. I'll be at ETHCC as well, just hanging out around the area. So I've got a calendar on my X profile. So if you want to book something, keep reading. I think my final word on like decentralization is that these discussions are always going to be happening, just at a different layer of abstraction. Like I feel like in the long term, long term, everything will go decentralized, but then we're going to have a further discussion. Infrastructure is decentralized, but what about like our intent agents that are driving our decisions? Do we have that in a single model, or do we have that like in a decentralized model? So like it'll just keep going, right? So just pick your trade-off right now. And make it happen. So I'm really into innovation in AI, and if you want to check out, I've got Medium articles on multimodals, on decentralized inference, etc. So and always feel free to reach out. So I think that's oh, and I've got a couple of bounties. Like DM me if you want a cash strap just to do some a few 10 use cases that are AI very interesting as well.
Andrew, go for it.
Awesome. Yeah. Follow us on Twitter. It's at Versatus Labs. And to amplify Jobin's point earlier, like we named our company Versatus because it's the Latin root of the word versatile. So, versatility, flexibility, I 100% agree with that. You have to remain flexible. You have to remain versatile, and you have to be able to adapt and adjust. Yeah, we're launching our public DevNet in the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's coming up very soon. Docs will be out in the next couple of weeks. So make sure to follow us at Versatus Labs, VERSATUS Labs on X. Still like saying Twitter. Versatus.io is our website. You can also, if you're in the US, you can go versat.us if you prefer that. And then follow me. I'm at Cryptonomicon. I'm just going to reveal why that's my name here, because I've asked people to reach out to me and tell me if they know what it means, but apparently we don't really have a deep history in like the cypherpunk novels. So Cryptonomicon is a very famous Neil Stephenson book, for those of you that are fans of that kind of world. And my fiance and my daughter are Mongolian, and so Khan plus Cryptonomicon is one of my favorite books. So that's where the name comes from. Cryptonomicon on Twitter, Khan with KHAN, like the great Khan. Yeah, reach out, follow me, DM me. If you want to contribute, you can contribute. Happy to have you. And yeah, we'll be launching our DevNet soon. And we got a lot of great partners that are committed to building on us, and we're really, really excited about it.
That's pretty good. Thanks everyone for being here, taking out time. And thanks everyone for listening. I think we've crossed 3.2K active listeners, or live listeners. So thanks everyone again. And I'm so sorry to extend for the next 20 minutes, but it was really fun. And I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, it's a great time. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys. Bye.